All right, let's dive in. Today, we're basically becoming literary detectives. We're opening a cold case file that's well over 1,000 years old. Our mission? To investigate a world of stories of heroes, monsters, and saints that came incredibly close to vanishing completely. And like any good investigation, it all starts with one big question.
No, really, think about that for a second. How does a poem manage to survive invasions, fires, massive cultural shifts, and just the simple decay of time for over a millennium? The story of Old English literature isn't just about the tales themselves, it's about the absolute miracle that we have any of them to read at all. So every investigation starts by securing the scene, right? Well, here's the problem. Our scene is completely shrouded in mist. We're trying to peer back into a time where hard evidence is, well, it's pretty much non-existent. Even the experts who study this stuff basically admit we're working in mists. We don't have signed first editions or cozy author interviews. All we have are echoes, just whispers from the past. We're basically detectives trying to solve a case with only a few fragmented clues. Yeah, so our case file is pretty empty. The poems we have, they're like photocopies of photocopies written down maybe 300 years after they were first spoken or sung. And the people who created them? Almost completely anonymous. It means scholars have to rely on conjecture, which is really just a fancy word for making really, really educated guesses to fill in these huge gaps in the story. Now let's get a feel for the world these stories came from, because they weren't born in quiet, peaceful libraries. Oh no. They were forged in an age of absolute turmoil, a time of chaos, invasion, and constant violent change. This timeline isn't just a boring list of dates, it's a series of massive cultural earthquakes. First, the Romans just leave. This opens the door for the pagan Anglo-Saxons, who bring their gods and their stories of monsters and fate. Then, Christianity arrives, introducing a totally new worldview. After that, the Vikings show up, another huge wave of invasion. And finally, the Norman conquest pretty much brings the whole Old English period to a screeching halt. Every single one of these events shaped and threatened the stories being told. So, if the original texts are gone and the authors are unknown, what clues do we actually have left? Well, we have the poems themselves, and they contain these distinct literary fingerprints that give us hints about the world and the people that created them. If you look closely at these poems, you can see two completely different worlds colliding. On one side, you've got the pagan warrior poet, they called him a scop, singing these epic tales of fate and glory in a loud, rowdy mead hall. On the other side, you have a Christian monk, quietly writing down stories about saints in the solitude of a monastery. And these two worlds didn't just exist side by side, they fused together, creating this really unique literary hybrid. So for 600 years, you have all these poets, these scops, and these monks creating this amazing body of work. Out of all of those creative voices, over all that time, how many do you think we can actually name? Two. That's it. Out of 6 centuries of literary tradition, only 2 names have survived, Caedmon and Cynewulf. And the only reason we even know about Cynewulf is because he did something really clever and basically signed his poems using runes, like a secret code. That's the staggering scale of anonymity we're dealing with here. Okay, so this brings us to the real heroes of our investigation. And they're not people, they're books. 4 lone survivors that, against all odds, managed to preserve almost everything we know about Old English poetry. I really want you to let that sink in for a moment. We know, for a fact, that what we have is just a portion, just a tiny fraction of everything that once existed. And that entire fraction, that whole literary world, is resting on the survival of just 4 physical objects, 4 books. And here they are, our 4 sole eyewitnesses. You've got the famous Beowulf manuscript, the Junius manuscript, the Exeter book, which is still in the same cathedral it was gifted to nearly 1,000 years ago, and then, unbelievably, the Vercelli book, which was discovered completely by chance in a library in Italy, of all places. These 4 artifacts are the only reason this entire literary world wasn't lost to time forever. So, we have the manuscripts. Case closed, right? Well, not quite. There's one last major hurdle. To actually read these stories, you have to crack the code they were written in, the Old English language itself. Now, this isn't like reading Shakespeare with a few these and thous.
This is, for all intents and purposes, a different language. It's got a super complex grammar and a vocabulary that would be almost completely unrecognizable to us today. You have to learn it from scratch, just like you would German or Latin.
And to make things even more complicated, it wasn't just one Old English. There were at least 4 major dialects. So why do most of the texts we have, including Beowulf, come to us in the West Saxon dialect? Simple: politics. The Kingdom of Wessex became the dominant political force, so their language became the standard for writing things down. Our literature was literally shaped by the sword.
Whew, okay, we've waded through the mists. We've examined the chaotic historical scene, and we've analyzed the literary fingerprints. I think it's time to review the key findings from our investigation. So here's the final summary for our case file. We're looking at a body of literature that was born from this incredible collision of pagan and Christian worlds. It was created by poets who are almost entirely unknown to us. Its entire legacy was saved from complete extinction by the sheer chance survival of just 4 books. And all of it is locked away in a language that, while being the very foundation of modern English, is now a code that has to be cracked. And that's really the thought that just haunts this entire field of study. For every Beowulf that we have, for every poem in the Exeter book, how many others were never written down? How many manuscripts were burned in Viking raids or just crumbled into dust over the centuries? We're left to wonder about the ghosts of this literary world and all the incredible epics that we will simply never get to read.